How on earth do I know that I'm going to be around to see the fruits of this labor?
My next guest is Andrew Lacy, a serial entrepreneur and CEO and founder of Prenuvo.
And so it started my journey to figure out what was going on with my health. And that was just a life-changing experience, knowing the state of my health in such a complete way that I felt like I'd seen the future.
In this episode, we dive deep into Prenuvo.
We are off to Prenuvo's clinic in LA here. Prenuvo is a full body MRI scan. What it's trying to do is basically detect and see if there's any health issues. It basically measures all your different organs out there. So I'm going to be in the MRI for about 45 minutes.
What impact it's had on many of the people that have taken the scans.
I get stories every single day now. I mean, 1 in 20 people receive a potentially life-saving diagnosis.
1 in 20.
1 in 20. You know, my friend did a scan and you found something that saved his life.
And what the future holds for preventative health as well.
The idea here is to be sort of a one-stop shop for an annual next generation physical that covers 99% of what you should be concerned about with your health.
The reason I started this podcast was to give you a trusted place to hear from the innovators changing your future. So if you want to be the first to be notified of new episodes, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. Now, let's dive into the episode. Andrew, at what point did you realize that preventative health, that health longevity was going to be your life calling?
Yeah, well, I don't have the same story as a lot of other people in the space. I am a serial entrepreneur. I worked a lot. I had a tremendous amount of stress. I didn't eat well. I didn't exercise. I'd had a few companies I'd sold. And I remember I was just about to embark on company number 4, and I woke up and looked in the mirror and I said, how on earth do I know that I'm going to be around to see the fruits of this labor? Because if something horrible was going on with my health, maybe I would enjoy better surfing in Hawaii. And so it started my journey to figure out what was going on with my health. And I did a whole bunch of independent tests, a colonoscopy, I got my skin checked, I did blood tests, and it all sort of painted a patchwork picture, but there was nothing that was very complete until I heard about a gentleman who was doing the scans that are now Prenuvo scans in Vancouver, Canada. And I went on a plane, and that was just a life-changing experience, getting screened, sitting down afterwards, looking at every single organ of my body and knowing the state of my health in such a complete way that I felt like I'd seen the future.
And what did you learn? What were the key learnings?
Well, the biggest one was I learned that I wasn't dying of anything.
Okay.
And, of course I learned a lot about how my bad lifestyle was impacting the physiology of my body. Things that if I didn't do something about it in 20 or 30 years, maybe I might sort of enter my 60s or 70s in a different state of health than what I would like to. But I came back, this clinic was in Canada actually, and I came back to the Silicon Valley and I just couldn't shake this sort of peace of mind that I had. And it's such a profound feeling, just sort of walking around feeling, it felt like if you've ever been skydiving, this sort of like feeling of adrenaline, like you saw the world in a little bit more colorful than I did before. And feeling like I was part of a secret club. I was walking down the street saying, hey, I know about my health. You don't, and you don't, and you don't. Everyone I passed, I was saying this in my head. And I'm like, man, this is like having this peace of mind is having such a profound impact on me that I went back and actually hung out in that clinic of that radiologist for 6 months and learned everything I could about, what he was doing.
Wow. I was recently at Vitalist Bay Summit, and Patrick House, who is a researcher at Stanford, he was asking the audience, or he was in conversation about, when given the question of, would I be doing the thing I'm doing now if I knew that I would die in 20 years? I think he was saying as a neuroscientist, right? And he said, yes, I would. 10 years, no. I'd be a writer, or I'd be surfing in Hawaii, or doing the things that I really want to be doing. The peace of mind that you got, you knew then that you had time to go again, right?
I think there's a time aspect to these decisions that we make. So it's not just a question of, what do I feel like doing today, And of course, I feel very fortunate because building this company has allowed me to have an impact on people's lives and get a lot of enjoyment out of building something that sort of is potentially transformative of an industry. But there's this time aspect to it, right? I mean, as a former entrepreneur yourself, I mean, it's not easy to be an entrepreneur. It takes time. You really have to put yourself into, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, is sort of what they say. So the question therefore is, am I ready and prepared? Is my body capable of running a marathon? And if my body is only capable of running a sprint, well, then I really need to make sure that I'm working on, how I spend the next couple of years of my life is spent well.
Let's go into Prenuvo. You had a quote on LinkedIn recently. I believe 2025 is a prescient moment for preventative health, with strong consumer demand, robust investor interest, and many public voices all calling for a transformation of our reactive healthcare system. Why is now the time for proactive and preventative care?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think there was a big awakening coming out of COVID, where most everyone I know certainly knew someone that passed away from COVID. And a lot of those people that passed away had what were called underlying medical issues. And a lot of those people that had underlying medical issues didn't know that they had them. And so I think saw a lot of people come into our businesses saying, hey, I want to know what I've got here. Do I have an abnormally high risk? Should I look after myself more? Is there anything I should address before I run into this virus or, until life catches up with me? And then I think the other influence, certainly that I see, is the cost of care is increasing, outcomes are getting worse. Even when you look at our government spends today, if you project that out 15 years, in 15 years, they'll have to spend today's entire federal budget on healthcare, given how our population is aging and the fact that we haven't transformed the way that we're doing health. So there's this sort of asteroid that's coming at us 10, 15 years into the future. And in some ways, it's the asteroid that people are only starting to talk about. And so these two sort of things collide, I think. Consumers are, for the first time, waking up to the idea that they can be in control of their health, that they have an opportunity to modify the trajectory of their health over their life. And then I think we have health systems, physicians, eventually governments waking up to the fact that the current approach to healthcare is unsustainable.
Yeah. God, this space is just full. So you've got biological age tests. You've got people like Neko Health that are doing, quick kind of, $250. You go in, you get the skin done, and you get grip strength and a few blood tests and a few other things. And then you've got longevity clinics that monitor you over a period of time.
Yeah.
Is there space for all? Like, why? Which one is going to give me the information that I need to know that I'm going to be okay in 10, 15, 20 years? Or if not, to take action today?
Well, I think that the starting answer is we're at the beginning of a real secular trend here towards consumer-directed health, particularly at the proactive end, and you hear people talk about people being the CEOs of their own health, or really sort of being in control, not a passenger. And I think the great awakening here is people realizing that they can be in control. And I think a secondary question is, okay, now I'm in control, what should I do? So I think we're still in the very early moments of this wave. And, I certainly have an opinion about what I think is, what are the most high yield tests that you can do, or what are the interventions that I've found personally very promising for my own health. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest transformation is people waking up for the first time and realizing they actually do have some control. And lost in the whole longevity movement is that it's still a very small movement relative to the size of the overall population. We're still sort of in the early adopter stage. And I'm just excited to see more and more people wake up. And I think to some extent that's going to it's going to float all of these interesting solutions that are out there, and over time we'll see which ones have longevity to them themselves.
Walk us through Prenuvo, as in I'm going for a scan tomorrow, and so I go to the clinic, and what happens then?
So we've built these clinics around the US and now internationally, and it's we designed it to be not a medical experience, to feel a little bit more like a concierge experience. And that's not because I particularly care about your comfort or I want to build something that's exclusive. It's because for a lot of people, stepping into a medical facility can be anxiety inducing. Yeah. We have been trained to avoid the health system because all the stories we hear are from people that got caught, diagnosed with something late. So we didn't want to trigger any of that. So you'll come to our clinic, you'll lie in these big MRI machines that we have. We have you watch television in there so that you're completely distracted.
As in you can stream Netflix, right? I think
we can stream television, video, any of these streaming platforms. Some people listen to Spotify. And in 45 minutes, the exam is done. We send those results to a dedicated team of radiologists that read primarily whole body imaging. And this is one of the things that's unique about us is we have a team that just does that.
Okay.
And 3 days later, you receive a report that's about 20 pages long, which goes through every organ of the body. What do we see? What do we not see? If we see something, what should you do about it? And you'll go through that report with a medical practitioner.
Okay. Yeah. And so it's very, very much organ focused. So it's not like a DEXA scan, which is looking at bone density. It's very much on the organs. Okay.
Yeah, it's... we also have insights around muscle composition, volume of different types of fat inside the body, organ size. So there are some DEXA-like measurements that we make, but we're able to see every single organ with these incredible machines. And we can see many up to 500 different conditions that you might be diagnosed with. So it's just a very, very comprehensive exam of every organ of the body.
What is the most surprising trends that you see coming out of this? Is there something that people keep on getting and they're like, oh my God, I would never have been able to get this from a normal blood test?
Oh, I mean, there's so many stories. It's crazy. We have, and not all of it is life-threatening, by the way. Some people will come in and they'll learn they're in their 40s and they've only got one kidney.
What?
And they had no idea. And typically what happened is they took a blow to the abdomen when they're a teenager and one of the kidneys atrophied and the other one grew bigger to take on the extra load. But now they're at a slightly higher risk. They want to make sure they look after that one kidney that they have. Yeah. We've had people that have learned that all of the organs in their body are reversed, which is a pretty rare condition. And you want to know about that if you're ever going to have surgery.
What do you mean by reversed? Isn't that just...
typically your liver is on your right side. For these folks, it's on the left.
Wow. Okay.
We've had people come in and learn that something they had been told about their health, they didn't fully understand what damage it was doing to their bodies. And a good example is like blood pressure or cholesterol. I mean, it's so easy to get a test where you say, oh, you've got moderately high cholesterol. Okay, well, what does that mean? It's just a number on a piece of paper. But we show the end organ damage in the brain from having high cholesterol. And it's like such a catalyst to like take your meds, Wow. So I'm really fascinated by these sort of insights. I mean, I think a lot of people come to do an exam to make sure they haven't got cancer or aneurysms, and we can find cancer at stage 1 and we see aneurysms, obviously before they burst, because that's usually doesn't have a good ending if they do burst. Yeah. But it's just for me so surprising and incredible that we can go through life without ever looking inside our bodies.
I went to a clinic that has recently raised quite a lot of money that it isn't Prenuvo, and it's definitely at the lower end of the scale, and it's not as comprehensive as what Prenuvo does. Does that mean that, like, really, if you want to be 100% sure, forget everything else, you really need to be doing the whole body MRI?
I mean, we do believe, and this is why we've focused so much on MRI, that 90+% of the insights come from imaging, from advanced imaging. Probably another 5% come from blood. And then there's a whole host of other modalities that get you the last 3 to 4%. A lot of other tests you do are biomarker tests. So when you do a whole blood panel, a lot of that is a biomarker. So you do a liver function test. It will tell you something about your APOE levels in your blood, but you don't know what's going on inside the organ. The only way to know what's going on inside the organ is to look. And with these machines, you're able to do that. Yeah. So a lot of other testing is about using biomarkers to sort of infer something about your health. With MRI, we're able to look inside and actually see what's going on with your health.
I'm really intrigued. So when I was 21, I had a near-death experience. I had a really bad accident, and I was at university. I was young, dumb, and just running around like a bit of an idiot. And I ended up landing on glass and actually lacerating my leg and
Wow.
actually cutting my quadriceps in half. And I fell really badly. And at the time, I was pretty out of it, so I didn't know how badly it felt. But I've come to realize over years of doing physio and osteo and chiro that I actually had a pretty bad fall on my upper back, my neck. And so I'm really interested to know when I do the scan, we will report on it in the episode as well at the end, just how I've always assumed, oh, okay, it's just the laceration here that's been affected. But what's going on in the rest of the body? I'm really interested about that. And then another thing is my lungs. I used to be an opera singer. I used to put a lot of work into really understanding my just breath. I'm really interested to understand what's going on in my lungs as well.
Well, one of the other crazy things is our body is, I mean, although we assess by organ, the body is a system. And that's why it's so hard for us to know what's going on with the health is, first of all, we have to experience a symptom. And then you have to relate that symptom into, to a particular disease.
Yeah.
And that second step is really hard. I'll give you some examples. And for women that have been pregnant, this is or have endometriosis, this is an example they'll relate to, is that if you get fluid in your abdomen, that sometimes that expresses itself as pain in the shoulder. In fact, if you have gallbladder cancer, also for some reason people experience it as pain in the upper arm. So the body is sort of connected in ways that we don't fully understand. Another example, which is pretty apt in Los Angeles, where we are right now, is liposuction. If you do liposuction and the person that does it doesn't understand how to do the procedure well, they can puncture the fascia. And the fascia is this sort of lubricating layer that enables your muscles and fat to sort of slip over each other. And if that gets punctured, the most common symptom you have is back pain. So it's sort of really difficult as a patient to even really understand, how do I relate these symptoms I'm feeling to an actual disease? So, again, it's one of the cool sort of insights that you get from these scans is we listen to your symptoms, but we don't, we just look with our eyes at these thousands of images we're taking and we catalog what we see.
We're at this point where I can't believe we're still here. We talk about like cars getting an MOT, right? And the idea of, let's say back in London, or I know Australia is different. I know California is different. There's more awareness about health and more of an appreciation for looking after your health. But I've spoken to a few of my GP friends that call me part of the worried well, because I go and for these scans and this and that. Why are we still at the stage where we have where we're talking about early adopters or innovators for someone going and actually getting these scans?
I don't know. I mean, for us, to be honest, what we've observed is a very big information asymmetry. So what physicians thought about the scan was not what they came to realize after they experienced it themselves. And so we often bring physicians into the clinics, we do a scan for them, or we take them through a scan, what it can see and what it can't see. And they start to really understand how this is maybe different to their preconceived notions. In fact, probably 8 out of 10 physicians are skeptical when we reach out to them the first time. And if we find a way for them to suspend their disbelief and sort of come in and really experience it, about 8 out of 10 start referring us patients. So I think a big part of it is just not really understanding how this technology has evolved. Another part of it, though, to be perfectly honest, is sort of we all fear, a lot of us have been trained to fear learning things about our health. Again, because we've grown up with hearing a lot of horrible stories of late diagnosis. And doctors are not somehow superhuman. They're humans too. And the number of times I've got into an argument with a physician where they're adamant that we shouldn't be doing these types of scans. And if you ask enough why questions, you start to realize that they themselves are afraid to learn about their own health.
Why do you think that is, that we prefer to stick our heads in the sand?
I think it's a normal psychological reaction to, what do you call it? It's a little bit, I'd rather take a little bit of uncertainty of all of my life than the possibility of having a life-changing thing happen to me today. I don't know. I felt that myself. I mean, when I went to do my first scan, and you may be feeling it now while you're thinking about it, I went out for a nice meal the night before with my wife. I'm like, let's enjoy this because probably my life is going to change tomorrow. And you know what? It didn't. I mean, it didn't in the way that I expected.
Yeah.
I mean, it did change in quite a profound way, in a way I didn't expect. And now it's like going to the dentist, not having been for 5 years. It's kind of scary. But after you do it that time, you want to keep doing it every 6 months. Yeah. Because you want to live your life never worrying about whether you need a root canal. And the same is true for what we do for the rest of the body.
We live in a world now where, like, I think I would say wearables are the gateway drug into preventative health, right? I've got a Whoop on. A lot of people have Auras or Apple Watches.
Yeah.
And the issue with these wearables is a lot of it is inferred by through AI. It's giving you some data that is just often like inferences, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And unfortunately, that means that I might get a sleep score of 5 hours restorative sleep. That actually might be completely wrong. It's just based on what they deem based on the most updated algorithm. And so, do you see a world where preventative health clinics and eventually merge with wearables, or they start speaking to one another?
Well, I think Wearables has shown us that people respond well to sort of quantifying how their health is going. And we are also looking into this. I mean, we have a large AI team that's building models. Some of those models are traditional AI models to diagnose disease, but some of those models are helping us understand how to age you. So to look at every organ in your body and not just tell you, whether you have a liver condition or not, but actually tell you how your liver looks compared to the liver of someone that what we would expect for someone of your age. And there's, I think, really interesting insights there. I'll give you an example. When we opened in Silicon Valley, the average age of previously we were in Canada, and the average age in Canada of our patients was 52 years old. When we opened in Silicon Valley, we started to see people in their 20s and 30s. If I showed a radiologist what a spine of the average 20-year-old in Silicon Valley and asked them to guess how old they were, they would say 35, 40 years old. Wow. So they were asymptomatic. Their spines felt generally fine. But the question is, what is that spine going to look like when they're 60? And so with AI, what we can do is start quantifying that. We can quantify the degree of disc desiccation or the vertebral body height of the spine or the curve angles of the spine. And of course, like when you build a big deep learning model, it sort of incorporates all this and builds a score and helps you understand, okay, you're doing worse than the average person of your age. But now you know about this. Let's work on some interventions, come back next year, and let's see how you're doing. Now, some conditions like spinal conditions, you can't reverse, but you can absolutely change the trajectory. And that was one of the things I learned from my first scan. My cervical spine was horrible because I spent a lot of time on mobile phones.
Gotcha.
Now I have a walking treadmill desk. I try and walk 5, sometimes even 10 miles a day. And my cervical spine has not got any worse in 6 years.
Okay.
So I think providing quantified feedback to folks, even through these scans, can help encourage positive lifestyle change.
People really want to know that they can get better.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like if they're going to be told that, again, this scan that I did with another company recently, the GP at hand was quite, she was pressing me on quite a few things, and she was being quite, let's say, negative about certain things. Like, I've got higher blood pressure than I should have, and if I carry on this way, it's going to be this. And it was quite scary to hear these things. Like, how do you balance actually being kind of honest with someone, but also giving them the right roadmap to get to better health?
It's a good question. I'm not sure we've fully nailed it, but I think I'll give you, some examples. Like the average male prostate gets something like 3% bigger every decade. The average brain shrinks 3% every decade. So we start to have these metrics and we start to understand how things evolve as you age. And in some ways, especially with, our bodies, our bodies will deteriorate as we get older. The goal here is not, I don't think the goal yet is to figure out how to not age. The question is, how can you beat the curve? And my team showed me a great AI model last week where they can look at your spine and show you what it looks like in 30 years time, what it will look like if you don't change your lifestyle. And then they have a few levers where you can make some tweaks, where you exercise more or sit less or have a better BMI, and they'll show you what your spine looks like under those conditions. So you start to set a target for yourself, and then you can like track yourself against this target, not to stop deteriorating. Unfortunately, that's part of the human condition, but deteriorate less.
Human condition right now.
Correct.
Brian Johnson might have other ideas, but okay. So tell us. So day one, you do the scan. Day 3, you get your results. What happens then on day 30, day 60? Is there a sort of protocol that someone could follow, or is there a bolt-on service that someone could adhere to?
At the moment, we've mainly at that point. We may have connected you with a specialist if there was something that was concerning that needs to be followed, but we've mainly handed you back to your primary care physician.
Okay.
It's obviously something, as we continue to evolve our service, something we're looking at, how can we, what service should we be providing our members where we give them someone to talk to throughout the interval, and help them sort of make positive lifestyle change.
Yeah.
But we haven't launched anything yet.
What is one health belief that you believed before you started Prenuvo that you've now debunked?
Oh, I mean, for me personally, there's been so many. The first one was I was invincible, that I feel great. Second would be I feel great, so nothing's wrong with me. The third is, you can impact significantly your health with very small interventions. As an entrepreneur, I would say my number one philosophy in building companies is a little bit 80-20. With 20% of the effort, you can get 80% of the outcome. And the benefit of a startup is any one person, therefore, can work the job of 5 people, at 80%. And I've sort of taken the same approach to my health. I don't have time to invest 10 hours a day. I can't be full-time on longevity. But I do believe there's like 1 or 2 hours that can get you 80% of the way. And I'm very focused on that.
Thanks for tuning in. As we are such a new podcast, every subscribe makes a huge difference. So if you're enjoying, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. Now, let's get back to the episode.
First of all, what is the average age of someone at Prenuvo who's coming in to the LA clinic compared to SF, let's say?
LA is maybe 40 years old.
Okay.
San Francisco is also around 40. When we look into Minneapolis, Chicago, Vancouver, Dallas, the age tends to be a little bit older.
Okay.
And that's because people are actually coming in for different reasons.
And what are those reasons?
So we have sort of 3 use cases, and they all are about equal. And I think there's a misconception about the screening that we do, that it's mainly just for these lifestyle longevity optimizers. And the reality is, if someone's interested in longevity, they're getting a scan. But it's still, I would say, like only 1/3 of our customers, people that are healthy and want to stay healthy. The second group are people that have either had cancer or have a strong family history of cancer and disease. And for them, not being screened like causes them anxiety. And then the last category are people that actually have indeterminate symptoms, and they come to us to get sort of an answer to those symptoms faster. And we see this a lot in Canada, and we will be launching in the UK in a couple of months. I think we'll see it there as well, where it's a little bit hard to get access to care in an expeditious fashion. And because the system is generally overloaded, there's a tendency to ignore people that present with symptoms. A good example is women that might present with indeterminate abdominal pain. And, for them, it's taken them a long time to admit that this is maybe not normal. And then they go to an overburdened health system, and you have to convince them also that it's not normal, and they should do something about it. And so they'll come to us to just get an answer and hopefully get onto a path towards treatment faster.
It's so interesting. Earlier on, you were talking about the random pains that are associated, right? And I have some neck pain. I also get a pain in my wrists. They're quite tight. Do you think the MRI scan, the full body, can give you answers to pretty much anything?
I don't think everything, but I think for an investment of 45 minutes of your life, I don't think there's a high yield modality or test that you could do.
I'm fascinated to find out what is going on in my body, because there is something going on, and I know it's not just in my head. And I think I have some sort of indicators, and I feel like a lot of the other tests are not giving me the information I need. And actually, I think the issue sometimes with these wearables, again, my Whoop, like my heart rate variability is doing really well. Like it's staying strong. And I think for a lot of people that might give them the idea that I'm healthy, but actually there's other things going on. And it's
Well, I don't want to discount the possibility that it's just in your head too. I mean, for a lot of people, it is just in their head. And, you know, this is sort of, I often tell my friends, you know, my hypochondriac friends, I'm like, this is like a cure to that problem.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like it shines such a bright spotlight on your entire body that there's really nothing left to worry about. So it is possible. Or you might think that it's something worse than it actually is. I had a woman that was convinced, a doctor who was convinced that she had ovarian cancer. Ovarian cancer because her mother had ovarian cancer. And she said she would wake up every day, look at her kids eating their breakfast, and imagine what their life is going to be like without their mother, because she surely had ovarian cancer too. She had pain down there, it was unexplained, and she came in for a scan, and we diagnosed a problem with her lumbar spine.
But that's not in her head. That is something else, though.
That's true, but like what was in her head was that, I mean, she went to dark places because she felt there was a symptom here, and no one had told her what it was. So in that sense, it was in her head, because that's where our brains go oftentimes. Of course. I guess some people will feel a symptom and minimize it. That's the typical Australian male like myself. You know, it'll be gone tomorrow. Don't worry about it. And other people, their brains go to a much darker place. And I think that there's a real toll to that emotionally, especially if the health system doesn't give you answers quickly.
But it really comes down to accurate data, because the Prenuvo scan is giving you really end-to-end data on what's going on, whilst a lot of people will, like, ChatGPT has become actually the de facto first call now, and so it's only going to be able to give you certain information based off of what is on ChatGPT, rather than actually the granular information that an MRI scan would give you.
Yeah, I mean, I think ChatGPT is amazing. Every so often I often upload images there and see what I ask it to diagnose problems, and it doesn't get it wrong 100% of the time. It's wrong more than 50% of the time. So it still has a lot of work to do. And I think some part of that is because it's trained on again, a health system that diagnoses things pretty late. So you might ask, hey, my cholesterol was X, and the year before it was a little bit less. Should I worry? And the traditional healthcare system would say, well, it's still in the normal range. But for a lifestyle optimizer, that's not a good answer. You know, the question is, why did it get worse? And what can I do about it? So I think as we start to diagnose disease earlier, and as we start to have all these different modalities, whether it's Whoops or 8-sleep mattresses or, frequent blood tests, we start to track longitudinally a lot more data. We will identify biomarkers of disease a lot earlier. And frankly, I think it's probably going to, first of all, train our brains on thinking about our health a different way, and then eventually train ChatGPT.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Andrew, what do you do on a day-to-day basis now that you've gone through this journey with Prenuvo for your health? Then how do you wake up? How do you sleep?
Well, I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't sleep very well. As an entrepreneur, I was too stressed. I didn't eat well. I didn't exercise. I'm not saying I've solved for all those problems. I've built my own sort of hacked version. So I love my treadmill desk because I can work and work out at the same time. I have a pressure plate as well that I spend time on.
Pressure plates?
One of these plates that wobbles.
Oh, yeah.
And it's on the other side of my treadmill desk, so I can also work and wobble away there. I take a few supplements, not very many.
What do you take?
I take vitamin D. As you can tell from my skin, I'm very deficient.
Sure.
I take NMN. I take resveratrol and omega. That's about it.
Okay.
Yeah. And as an Australian, I get my skin checked every year. I do a Prenuvo scan every year. I do all my regular screenings like colonoscopies, and I maybe do my best to eat a little bit better. And I've started to appreciate as I've aged that the more sleep I get, the more everything else works better in my life. So that's probably my single biggest point of leverage. If I can sleep 8 hours, I'm more likely to want to exercise. I will be less stressed, and I'm more likely to eat better. And that's as religious as I get.
How many Prenuvo scans have you taken so far? You've taken one a year, is that?
I've taken 6, I think,
Okay.
or 7, yeah.
What year were you healthiest? As in, what year did you see the best improvements or the least deterioration? And was there any reason for that? Any factors behind that?
Nothing. I mean, I wouldn't point to anything I've done that has. I think over 7 scans, you start to realize also that that life is. You start getting older. Things start happening. I'm sure knowing about the state of my health 6 years ago, and acting on that has made fewer things happen, but things still happen. Which, if I'm being totally honest, are a little bit disappointing. I was somewhat hopeful that my health would not going to change at all.
Yeah.
But you start to develop some little cysts or some other wear and tear, or and some of that's just informational. Thank God for me. But it makes me realize that if benign things can happen as I age, so can things that are much more serious, and I need to keep an eye on this.
So Australia's in the pipeline, so is London,
Yeah.
And I'm assuming a few more places in the US.
Yeah, we're in 19 locations in North America now. We open in Melbourne in a couple of weeks. We're opening in the UK just as soon as we get a license there. We have a facility that's ready.
Whereabouts will it be?
It's in Fitzrovia.
Okay.
Yeah. I was trying to remember my London anatomy, my London geography. And then we will be looking to open in Dubai and Singapore next year. So the idea is to have a Prenuvo sort of hub where people can travel to easily, no matter where they are in the world, and get one of these scans.
Yeah. Talking a bit about sleep, but in the context of Prenuvo and your expansion, what's keeping you up at night?
I think I'm a little bit concerned about, I'm both excited and concerned about the growth in sort of consumer-directed health. I think the upside is, for the first time, people are thinking about this, but I also do feel like it's a little bit Wild West out there. And particularly LA is sort of epicenter for this. You can't walk down a street in LA and not see a health spa offering some sort of intervention that typically is not particularly scientifically backed. And I am somewhat concerned about the reputational damage to the entire space. If some of those interventions get exposed as being pretty useless.
Can you mention a few that our listeners should avoid?
Well, I don't want to look. I'm also not an expert. I mean, I know very well my own business, and I would say I've not seen enough evidence that would lead me to believe that I would want to go and necessarily do, hyperbaric chambers and IV drips and a bunch of these things that are out there. That's not to say that they're necessarily bad. It's just I haven't seen evidence. And maybe the evidence is forthcoming. But it does feel a little bit like there's a lot of folks out there that maybe don't have a real clinical team working with them to design interventions that are supported by evidence and that necessarily have the patient's best interest at heart.
This space is going to change. Like, we are just at the beginning, and I'm so excited to where it's going to go. And I think the value is going to be huge. So if I were to look into your crystal ball, 2030, what do you think preventative health, the space, will look like?
I think preventative health will be healthcare. I mean, right now it's its own little minor offshoot of the larger reactive healthcare system. I mean, the world that we would like to create is one where everyone is getting a screening every year, imaging, blood, and a few other modalities. We're catching 98% of what we could at an early stage, oftentimes where worst case you need an inexpensive outpatient procedure or some risk modifying drugs like statins or lifestyle intervention to make a huge difference to the trajectory of your health. And if we have that health system, if we're diagnosing everything early, I think everything downstream of that, which is the entire reactive healthcare system, changes completely. And I think we transform that healthcare system from one that at the moment is very expensive, leads to poor outcomes, is stressing every medical professional trying to do the best they can to deliver a poor quality of care to everyone. And I think we'll have a smaller, leaner health system where, staffed by practitioner coaches that spend less time trying to figure out what's going on with you and more time trying to help you be better in your health journey. So I think it'll look more like your gym coach. So the relationship with healthcare might be more like your relationship with your gym coach in 20 years' time. And I think that would be an awesome future to build.
But for that to happen, you have to, the system there's an incumbent, right? And the system is pretty archaic, and there are many people that are benefiting from the system, right? Whether it's insurance companies or pharma companies. And so to shift that is going to take quite a bit of work. And so you're seeing slowly some cracks in the system. But do you think there's going to be an inflection point in the next few years where things will start to tumble?
Yeah, I think, and I'll give some examples. I mean, we will give you a complete catalog of everything in your body. And we do our best, and this is something that you don't normally get with a radiology report, to tell you, hey, this thing is benign, don't do anything about it. And so, every so often we hear a story of someone going back to the reactive healthcare system and then being subjected to a battery of tests that weren't necessary. And I don't know whether that's motivated by profit, or I don't know if it's, or maybe I'll just be motivated by litigation risk, or it may be motivated by abundance of caution. So I'm not saying if we work to transform the front end, I'm not saying that the back end doesn't have to transform as well. But I take issue sometimes with folks that say the transformation shouldn't happen because the back end is archaic. That's an excuse. And I think eventually enough people, make changes at the front end to how they're managing their health, that I think you sort of convince the entire system that it needs to shift. And I don't know when that will happen. I don't think it's this year, but I don't think it's in 20 years.
Have you had any deep personal stories of family or friends, or again, family or friends of your co-founders or your senior leadership team that have had a scan and have been saved by the work?
Oh, I mean, I get stories every single day now, in LinkedIn, in emails. I mean, 1 in 20 people receive a potentially life-saving diagnosis.
1 in 20.
1 in 20. Okay. And probably about 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 receive information about their health that makes them make a pretty significant lifestyle change. That might be a marathon runner that actually figures out all the carb loading because of their exercise has given them severe fatty liver, and they're now pre-diabetic and had no idea, even though they look skinny on the outside. So some of these are very non-obvious insights. So yeah, it's had a huge impact. And I was remarking to my team today, actually, a phenomenon I feel like has just been taken over the last couple of months. I call it the by the way phenomenon. It's when I receive an email from someone that's, I don't know, just responding to something. And at the end of the email, they add, by the way, my friend did a scan and you found something that saved his life. Or by the way, I did a scan. I'm actually a customer of yours. I did a scan a while back, and now I've learned a medical condition I'm monitoring much more closely. So it's it's happening. And these movements, they start really small and then they start to snowball.
I'm assuming hiring must be pretty easy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're pretty mission driven. Every time I receive a message, I have a channel on Slack, and I anonymize that message and drop it in a channel for everyone in the company to see. Because it doesn't matter if you're a radiologist or, the receptionist in the clinic, or an engineer building tech for us, or an AI person. I mean, all of them have, a part to play in what we're delivering to every patient.
For those listening that might be interested in moving into preventative health, what do you think is the greatest opportunity in the space right now?
That's a great question. I mean, there's so much. I would say probably at the front end, I mean, every single profession in medicine, I think, will get reinvented into a preventative version of itself. So if someone is a physician, historically, you could be a primary care physician, insurance paid, and then maybe when you become sort of like more experienced in your craft, you become a concierge physician. But you still distinguish yourself by like answering the phone call at 2 a.m. in the morning, and you'll go to the hospital with the patient when they have surgery. I think now is the moment to think about, well, what is like if I want to be Peter Attia light, what does that look like? How can I be like him, but maybe not as expensive? I think the same is true for people that are practicing physiotherapy. How do I become a preventative physiotherapist, not a reactive physiotherapist? If I'm a neurologist, what's the preventative version of that? Maybe I could dedicate my life to actually dealing with dementia before it approaches like a clinical stage, a chronic stage. What would that look like? So I think across the entire spectrum, there's a possibility for every medical profession to like reimagine itself. And I think that's really exciting that we new companies. I don't think we even know what that looks like for every profession, but it's going to be a profound change.
We had Michelle Lucas on the podcast a few episodes ago, and she talks about how she's a psychotherapist and a shamanic practitioner. And she talks that when someone is in the people that come into her office are crawling in. They don't just say, you know what, I need to go and see a psychotherapist. And I feel sometimes it's the same with being proactive about your health. It's usually, often people will go in when it's too late.
Yeah.
And so how do you change the system? How do you get people saying, like, for example, a physiotherapist, like I have slightly dodgy knees and a dodgy ankle. I should definitely see a physiotherapist. And that's me being reactive. I should have started seeing a physiotherapist or been going and getting that training, way before. What changes the system? How can the system itself motivate people to be more proactive?
Well, I think it starts with speaking to the fears that individuals have. So, I mean, we've gone through an interesting journey as a company. I remember when we first started, I now live in LA, but I was living in Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley, when you start a company, it's always like features and benefits. So it's like, here's all the diseases that we cover. Isn't this comprehensive? And it only costs this amount. What great value for money? And you get your scans in an app because, that's what you do in Silicon Valley. So, and that was sort of our marketing in the early days.
Yeah.
And then we start to realize, you know what? We got to start to talk to people in a much more sort of like visceral way. So we actually, I think probably we were maybe like 30 people as a company. I hired my first videographer. And whenever we heard an interesting story from a patient, we would send him to go and do like put together a patient story. And we went through that, and it was very successful. People have copied what we did. But those stories were all oftentimes like in the following format, like I'm a normal person, I'm in my 30s, everything was going fine. On a whim, I thought I'd get a Prenuvo scan, and they found something. And it had a really happy ending, usually the stories. But I started to realize after a while, maybe some people weren't sticking around for the happy ending. Like that act of like sort of manifesting the worst case scenario was like, was triggering of this anxiety that we have. So most recently we've been talking about, we've been sharing patient stories about, what does it mean to even feel peace of mind? How do you describe that? Or what does it mean to like get insight into something that today is not at all concerning, but might be in 20 years time? How do you work on that? And feel comfortable with that idea versus necessarily the idea that we're going to find something that's going to change your life. So I don't think we have the answer. I think that's the beautiful thing about human psychology is we're all different. Some people can't wait to come in for a scan.
Yeah.
And other people, smart people, even doctors who have been around and seen the consequences of late detection, they're like, I'm not sure I want to know. So yeah, it's a real challenge, but that's the challenge for not just us, but for the entire space.
Prenuvo moving forward, apart from the expansion, like what could Prenuvo look like in the next few years away from just the MRI scan?
Yeah, so we started about 2 months ago also doing blood. So we launched this in a few locations and we're rolling it out. It's going really well. We are really trying to push the boundaries of MRI as a technology. We launched this advanced neuro exam. That is I think the most comprehensive exam that you can do to understand your dementia risk in 20 or 30 years by looking at the flow of blood in the brain and identifying regions of the brain where that blood flow is compromised. We are working on cardiac sequences. We are working on dedicated sequences, particularly for breast imaging for women. So we're really pushing the technology. We're looking at a few other modalities. So the idea here is to be sort of a one-stop shop for an annual next generation physical that covers 99% of what, you should be concerned about with your health.
And just going back to peace of mind.
Yeah. We throw that in for free.
Yeah. No, I love that. But it's because at some point someone needs to, again, I've done a few blood tests. I've done my genomics. I've done my DNA, whatever, methylation tests and all this stuff. Really what I want is a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Is that, so tomorrow when I get the MRI scan, would that be the one-stop shop, or would it be when I've had all the other package stuff?
I think that's what we're working towards. Okay. So this enhanced package that we put together that we launched 2 months ago, that's now getting you to sort of 97%. There's a few things that we don't cover. We don't look at the skin.
I'm Lebanese by origin, so I think I should be fine. So
you should be fine. We don't. There are a few things that retinal imaging could tell us about your health. We still don't necessarily know your blood pressure, or there are certain things that we just can't see with imaging and the tests that we're providing. But again, the whole idea here is not to be exhaustive, because exhaustive is sort of like the Cleveland Clinic 3-day experience where you do 100 tests and you have to fly somewhere and it costs $50,000. The idea is there something that's much less expensive that gets you 99% of what you need if you have normal risk? And if you learn that you have a high risk, then there are other tests that you can sort of bolt on that really cover everything for you.
So for anyone looking to go on a Prenuvo journey, what would you recommend? What piece of advice would you give them?
What's really interesting is the average time it takes for someone to actually decide to come in for a scan from when they first hear about us is about 60 days. So imagine the mental journey that they're going through in building up the courage to actually look inside in a profound way. And I often want to tell people that's okay, that it is we've been trained for this to be a scary explanation, and it's sort of hard to convince people that on the other side of that is clarity and transparency and this sort of peace of mind, not necessarily peace of mind that everything is fine, but peace of mind in the sense that you know what's going on and you can do something about it. And I've done 6 scans, but I still get a little nervous before each one. So this psychology is deeply embedded. And I think for anyone that's looking to really sort of take the red pill and sort of check out of the matrix where we are just sort of a passenger and really want to take control of their health, they have to expect that psychology is going to be kicking in. The fear of what they might find, the desire to put it off for another day. And I think that's true not just for Prenuvo, but for a lot of the tests that are out there. And I would just encourage folks to really try and break through that. And trust me and believe me when I say being on the other side of that and having clarity about what's going on, what you can do about it is just, it's a different experience. It is feeling like you're living finally the health care system that we all sort of grew up when we watched science fiction. And it's possible today.
Andrew, thank you so much. If anyone wants to go on their Prenuvo journey, 19 locations in the US and also soon to be in Melbourne, London, Dubai and Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Tomorrow podcast. We'll see you next time.